And it's not just a woman's prerogative to change your mind. It's human prerogative to change our minds. Because we're constantly taking in new information all the time. And we're changing our minds all the time. I mean, we could be going down through the buffet line and we see the cheeseburger and we start taking that and then we say, wait a second, there's lasagna. Forget it, yeah, just going for the lasagna. And then let's say I don't know, the cooks here were really going out of their way and you see the filet mignon down the line, it's kind of like, lasagna goes away. That's okay. So as you take in more information, you change your mind. Now, what we see then, the very nature of a human being, is that we need time to make up our minds because we have a rational intellect. Okay? Now, we also say because we have a body, we need a place to be. Okay? So, now let's go back in the context of the whole, what I just said, is the world was made for man, and man was made for heaven. Okay? So, if we go back to the lesson here then, God has created the universe, created the physical world, so that man, which of course means men and women, can live out their lifetime making the decision, their free choice, to obey God or not. Okay, whereas the angels only needed a minute or a moment, we need a lifetime. Okay, so this world is our place of probation. Okay, now if we take the context then again of the seventh day God rests and we should rest too. Now what you'll notice, every one of the 6 days before that, evening came, morning followed the next day. But on the seventh day, you will notice that there is no mention of an ending. Okay, there's no evening came and morning followed. Okay, the story ends. So what do we see then is this seventh day is not in time. It's heaven. Okay? So, eternal rest grant unto us, O Lord, or unto them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. What are we praying for? We're praying to go to heaven. Okay? So, what do we see then is the Sabbath rest, is that weekly reminder that we were made for heaven. The world was made for us. We were made for heaven. Now, do we have to work in the world, and do we have a role as co-cooperators and co-creators with God? The answer would be yes, we do. And again, to understand remember, work was not, let me rephrase that. Work was there before the fall. Okay? Adam and Eve were placed in the garden to take care of it, tend it, perfect it, and offer it back to God. So that's what I'm saying, we're co-creators with God, in the sense that He's given us the raw material of the world that He created, and then He gives it to us to, if you would, do the finishing work. Okay? And what is so much the tendency of man, especially fallen man, is to think that he lives to work instead of works to live. Okay, so we get, if you would, bogged down with the means as if it were the end. Okay, so the Sabbath rest is that idea of the weekly reminder is, I was not made for the physical world. I am not just to dwell in the happiness of this life, but I am using this world to be able to go to God. Okay, so there's that understanding then of, that is why this is the first commandment, okay, to be mentioned in the scriptures. And that is God made this day holy, and therefore we should be keeping it holy too, would be, again, that idea of always keeping the focus of what's the meaning and purpose of life. To know, love, and serve Him in this life, so as to be happy with Him forever in the next. The old Baltimore Catechism. It still holds true. Okay.
I hope so.
Yes, it does. In fact, the Catechism of the Catholic Church quotes it a couple times, or at least uses the same exact words. Okay, maybe not intentionally quoting it. Okay, so there's that aspect of the Sabbath then, is that weekly reminder of why we're here. Okay. Now, what we also see as the Bible unfolds, goes through Exodus, Leviticus, etc., what we see then is it's also associated, the seventh day is also associated with the great liberating event of the Exodus itself. And to, again, quote Deuteronomy, remember that you were slaves in Egypt, but I brought you out by my mighty hand. And that is why you should rest on the Sabbath. Okay, so what's behind that statement is then, if you remember in Egypt, you were forced to work every single day. And in fact, the Egyptians were doing it to grind you down so that you would not prosper and that you would, if you would lose your spirit and be destroyed in one sense, right? That they would crush the Israelites under the toil that they were putting them under. Okay, so again, the tyranny that can happen when man only lives in the material level. Okay, so there's that understanding then is I freed you from that. And what's the whole reason for taking you to the promised land? Is so that you can live the covenant that I have made with you, the relationship, where God is the center and the Sabbath is, if you would, the whole rhythm of life. Is that I'm working, but I'm cooperating with God in creation, and He is liberating me from my sins and from this futile way of life so that I can go to heaven. Okay, so I hope you can already see where the positive side of this commandment is. Remember to keep holy the Lord's Day. And, that is a problem human beings have all the time. Amnesia. Yes. Forgetting all the good things that God did for us. Forgetting all the gifts that that we enjoy. And our whole meaning and purpose of life. Okay, so remember why you're here. Now, that's if you would, the Old Testament context of this commandment. Now let's look as transformed by Christ. Okay, so what we see is the day of creation is the new creation. So on the seventh day, God rested. Well, if you think about it, Jesus, on the sixth day, He died on the cross to reshape our fallen humanity. And He does actually finish His work and rests in the tomb on Saturday. So He is observing the Sabbath rest. But on the first day of the week, He rises again. So we have the eighth day, which symbolizes the resurrection. In fact, it used to be in the ancient design of baptismal fonts that they were octagonal for a reason in baptistries, like St. John Lateran. Why was it octagonal? It's for the eighth day, the day of the resurrection. Okay, so what we see here then is Jesus totally realigns the whole, if you would, the day of recreation, the day of resurrection, is going to shift the day of Sabbath, to the Lord's Day, the day of rest, but also of worship and thanksgiving, the day of joy of the Sabbath, or of Sunday. So, quoting Justin Martyr here then, and this would be like from around the year 150 AD, so roughly 100 years after Christ, a little more than that, but you get the idea. So, and by the way, Justin Martyr would be already reflecting a tradition that was given to him, right? He didn't come up with this. This is from apostolic times. We all gather on the day of the sun, for it is the first day when God, separating matter from darkness, made the world. And on this same day, Jesus Christ, our Savior, rose from the dead. So this idea of Sunday is always a little Easter, right? Every Sunday is a little Easter. And we can say that, again, this is the day that all of the liturgical seasons focus around. And this is the most ancient of feast days, and that is from the apostolic times. Sunday is the Lord's Day. Okay, and so what we see here then is Pope John Paul mentions in Dominus Dei, Dies Domini, I got it right behind, that the Sunday Eucharist is the heart of the Church's life. And if we look at Sacrosanctum Concilium, it says the Eucharist is the source and summit of the Church's life. When we say source, In other words, the sacrifice of Jesus and his resurrection from the dead are the source of our faith, the source of our salvation. Okay? And it's also the highest activity that we can perform is to unite ourselves in union with Christ and offering ourselves to the Father in the Holy Spirit. That this is the core of our life as Christians. So, since this is the very source and summit, the heart of our life, we can see that this commandment should be obeyed on all sorts of different levels. And I would say Pope Paul VI in Evangelium Nuntiandi also mentions that you aren't truly evangelized until you willingly participate in the sacraments. And I would further that and say, unless we are willingly coming together on Sunday to offer the Eucharist, can we really say we're truly converted to Jesus? Okay, it shouldn't be something that I have to go to Sunday, it's my Sunday obligation. Okay, or I have to go to, it's a holiday obligation, I have to go to Mass. So that, what? What type of attitude is that? It's kind of like, I get to go to Mass, I get to join with my Christian brothers and sisters in union with Christ to offer my whole life to the Father. This is, again, if the meaning and purpose of life is to know, love, and serve God and be happy with Him, it's not like I have to, it's I get to. This is my life's blood. Okay, so I hope we can see this commandment. It is also, I believe, the first positive one in the list. But there's a reason for it. It's not just, it would be nice if you went to Mass on Sunday, but really it's at the core of, if you're really truly a believer, this is something that you would do with joy, not seen as a burden or an obligation. Okay, so let's now look at the positive commands of these. Now, for Christians, for Catholics, the positive command means Sunday Mass. Okay? And if we look at this, Sunday Mass is, again, it's the very lifeblood of the church. That's when the whole church comes together as the body of Christ. It's also when we are nourished with the Word of God. This is where major catechesis takes place. This is the queen of all days for adult catechesis. For a lot of people, it's the only catechesis they get. Right? They're only nourishing with the Word of God. Yes, ma'am?
How about people who work Saturday night for Sunday? I don't understand that.
Well, that is that's going back to the ancient Jewish counting of days. Evening came and morning followed. So the Saturday night vigil is actually part of the Sunday. And if you properly fulfill Sunday, what do you see happening in like European countries that were from the beginning Catholic? If you go back to the practices, say before World War II, especially, what you have is everybody in that little village, and it used to happen here in the, like I can remember at Colwich, people, not that I grew up there, but I've heard people talk about, everybody would stop work early on Saturday to go to confession. They would attend the Vespers. In fact, we were digging through the choir loft of one of the old abandoned churches and found, old curiales, which were basically hymn books that had evening prayer in them. Okay, the whole community started the Sunday observance with the Vespers on Saturday evening, and then it continued the next day with Sunday Mass. So, since Vatican II, they kind of reinstated that with the Mass being there. But yes, it was originally for those who, for whatever reason, could not make it to Sunday Mass. And that kind of, I guess I was going to bring it up later, but now is a good time, is what's a real problem for modern people in our society is they see Sunday as part of the weekend instead of seeing it as a day of worship. So for a lot of people, you start partying on Friday, you relax and enjoy yourself on Saturday and Sunday, and then what you do is Sunday evening, you cram in all the things that you need to do for Monday. Okay? So that Sunday hardly becomes a day of rest, it becomes kind of like, well, I have Sunday morning and then I have to get back to work. So it totally shifts. And also, if you see Sunday as just a day, a free day, to recreate and enjoy yourself. Now, not saying that that's not part of what Sabbath rest is about, is recreating, as in restoring yourself, but to see it only as an excuse for a party is going to shift the meaning of why you rest on Sunday. Okay, so, and unfortunately, some people do use the Saturday evening mass. That's not everybody, though. I know a lot of elderly go to the evening masses because it's just too hard to get up. I mean, all the pain and the just working through that to be able to make it to a Sunday mass before noon is kind of hard, whereas 4 o'clock on a Saturday evening is a doable thing. Okay, so that would be one of the things that we've done. And I know my mom was a night shift nurse for ages, and she wanted to be attentive at Mass, so she went to the Saturday evening Mass so that she could really pray. Because if she tried to go to a Mass on Sunday morning, she was, falling asleep during it.
And presumably, sister, there's less children, and you can really concentrate.
Well, I don't know about that. It seems, I was going to say, it seems to me, well, it depends upon the parish. Really.
Does it really?
Yes, it really does. But I know, like, living over at St. Joseph's for, about 12 years, what I noticed about they have 4 o'clock Mass. Actually, it was originally 4:30, and when they did a survey for the parish, the elderly of the parish asked for an earlier time. They asked for 4 o'clock. So that's the earliest you can be. And I know when I would go over there to confession, so confession was 3 to 4, and people started gathering, and it was just full. The front row for handicap was just full of people in wheelchairs and sitting in the front pews. I mean, that was the Mass they could attend. Whereas I went to the 7:31 or 8:15 one, and there was maybe 1 or 2 elderly in the front row. So you'd have to say that the church is accommodating everybody. And if we think about it, what are we trying to do in our diocese is to really, you have like 28 hours to go to fulfill your Sunday obligation, right? So starting 4 p.m. On Saturday, there's late Sunday masses, even 9 o'clock. Okay, so I guess even 29 hours to go to make your Sunday obligation. So the church is trying to make it as easy as possible for people to fulfill their obligation. But I would say it is a sad thing when people are going to the Saturday evening Mass so that their Sunday is totally free to sleep in and just recreate and do sports and things like that. Okay. And I suppose I could make a side comment and say it's really sad to see my students are more upset about not recycling than missing Mass on Sunday. And that's an orientation that needs to be shifted. Yes?
Sister, is television Mass allowed? I remember in Florida, my parents they were very old and sick, and I'm sure the Mass was
That would be better than nothing. But Pope John Paul mentions that in Dies Domini. And what he would say is that obviously a televised Mass does not replace your Sunday obligation, but it is valuable to those who are homebound and ill, who can't make it to Mass. That is one way for them to keep Holy the Lord's Day and be able to at least pray and join with the community. And then, of course, that would be completed by, say, Eucharistic ministers coming to give communion to those who are homebound. Yes, it's definitely, and it would be precisely for those people that it would be televised.
Do you have that here in Wichita? Do you have television Mass?
Radio.
Yes.
Do you have television Mass?
Well, I know that definitely on Christmas that is televised, but you have EWTN.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will admit, I don't know about it seems to be a gray area when you have overflow in the mass, or the overflow in the parish, and you're like down in the gym getting a televised mass. But the idea is it is taking place in the building, you're just following it, and when the time comes, you're getting communion. I mean, that sometimes is a necessity, but I know that some parishes, they've solved that by having 2 masses. So like over at St. Thomas for, say, Easter, or Ash Wednesday, I think they did it, there was one mass started on the main church, and then down in the basement, about 10 minutes later, they started the next mass. So the overflow crowd was getting a real mass and not just a televised mass. But I'll leave that to the bishops to decide on that one. But I know that some pastors have gone to that. You had a question.
Well, I agree with all you said about Saturday night mass, but you know, there's some of us that go to daily mass. And we have Saturday morning, and then you go to Saturday, so you go to mass every day except Sunday, twice on Saturday. That just doesn't seem right to me.
I have a good friend who's a daily communicant, and we tease him about it because he lectures or ushers at the Saturday night mass at Magdalene, and says, here's this daily communicant who doesn't go to mass on Sunday. Because he goes to the Saturday evening.
I mean, I'm not making any judgment.
Kind of give him a hard time about it.
I didn't make any judgment, it just seems ironic.
Yes, and it's sad that a lot of parishes don't have the Saturday morning mass.
That's true,
So-
ours does.
So what a lot of people do is they go to the Saturday mass for their Saturday mass, and then they go to the Sunday also. But yes, it is very ironic that there's some people that they go to mass every day except Sunday. Weird. Okay.
What do you think of going to church in the morning and in the afternoon going to the casino?
It is permissible to go to 2 different masses and receive communion twice in a day. You can.
Oh, casino.
No,
Casino.
Oh. That was a different question. Okay, let's start over. So you go to casino?
I'm asking.
You go to Saturday mass and they go to the
Sunday
casino
morning.
every Sunday?
Sunday morning.
Okay, sounds like they have 2 gods that they're worshiping. Okay.
Oh.
My apologies, that might have been too quick of a judgment.
Permissive.
Okay. Well, Sunday Mass, if we get back to the main topic here, we've kind of digressed a bit. Okay, but Sunday Mass is supposed to be that time when we come together as community, the good witness of everybody with each other. That's the time to be in community. That is the time to be nourished by the Word of God and the body of Christ so that we become one. So it's not just the family that prays together, stays together, says Father Peyton, but it's the parish that prays together that's going to stay together, that's going to have a strong, vibrant parish life. You need to come together. Okay, so it's part of what we do as being Catholic or being a follower of Jesus, a disciple of Christ. Okay, now the next part of this positive command is rest. Now you've got to realize in the early church, this was more of the aspect of the Sabbath, right? Saturday. And that would be because of they didn't get off work. You know, the Roman society did not recognize either the Sabbath or Sunday as a day of cessation, so of labor. So the early Christians, with great sacrifice, would get up early. And you've got to realize in Rome, that's really early because the business day, even to the present, starts somewhere around 4 a.m. Okay, so people getting up very early to be able to attend the Sunday Mass with each other and then go to work, because at first the whole aspect of rest wasn't there. Okay, but it was, how can we exist without the Eucharist? So the early church is, Sunday Mass is necessary, even to the risk of our lives. And we think about it, there are still places in the world today where that's exactly the way it is. We think of a lot of in Saudi Arabia, a lot of the workers that are treated not much better than slaves. are from like the Philippines, and they are going there because they can be paid so much and send it to their families. And these are mostly Catholics. That if they have an opportunity for Mass, it's going to be something that they have to, risk their being arrested.
I saw the priest once, he was in Qatar right next to him, and it was against the law of Saudi Arabia for him to go say Mass on Sunday, so he would sneak in and say Mass for the Filipino, like you said.
Right.
So, that's a great risk. So.
Well, and other countries where there's open persecutions of Catholics, that they are taking the risk to even do their Sabbath or do their Sunday obligations. And for us here in America, we kind of forget what a privilege it is to be able to worship openly. So that aspect too. But now let's look at the rest. What we see when Christianity was made legal by Constantine, we start to see rest come into the observance of Sunday as well. So that idea of not just, like I was saying before, Sunday's a day off, it's free time, I can do whatever I like, but rather rest as a restoration, a recreation of our lives. And this would, of course, be rest that would include time to be with our children, time to be with our families, time to look around at our neighbors. And what's happened in our own society is we don't even know who our neighbors are, right? Whereas it used to be Saturday evening, again, would be that time of getting out, getting to meet and visit with people, and then Sunday afternoon, even in the, I can think of my great-grandmother, she would clean like the Dickens on Saturday morning, and then their parlor would be open all Sunday, right? And people would go and visit each other, and then she would clean it again really thoroughly on Monday and put newspaper down and everything, so that it would be, the parlor would be perfect for the next Sunday visit. Okay, so that whole idea now, and by the way, she's Presbyterian, not Catholic, but she had the right idea of Sunday is a day when you build relationships with other people. It's not just our relationship with God, but it's also, love of God and love of neighbor. This is a time, rest, of course, to cultivate our relationship with God, to do spiritual reading, to maybe do something as a family that would build up the relationship and the faith of the family. And also, and that would be the third thing, works of mercy and charity are the things you do. If you think about it, the people who are shut in and the sick, when are they going to feel their, if you would, helplessness and isolation the most? Is going to be on a Sunday. So this would be the time period that we should be going to, if we know of people who are sick or shut in on Sunday, to go and visit them and to, maybe bring something to them like cookies or whatever, or just to give them some of your time to build them up. Okay, so now, obviously we shouldn't just do works of charity on Sunday, but if on those days we have a little bit more free time, then that might be something to work into your Sunday schedule. See, so these are all positive commands. And again, you think of like the sermons of St. John Chrysostom saying, why do you come to church dressed in silks and cover the altar with gold, whereas Christ is out on the street shivering with cold and hungry? Give to the poor first, and then what's left over come and decorate the altar with. And if we look at that, we see that Sunday works of mercy and works of charity should be what we should be doing too. Okay, so it's not an absolute no work whatsoever. We don't need to go to the extremes like in Israel. Hotels actually have the elevator set for Sabbath rest. Is because pushing the button is work. So basically, the elevators open every so often at each floor, so that you can just walk in and it takes you, so that you don't have to even press a button. I mean, that's an extreme. It's not that no work is to be done, but rather what we see here is works of charity are definitely not just not forbidden, they're actually commanded. Okay, so doing good to others and building up our relationship with our families, with others, which are going to bring us closer to God. St. Teresa of Avila says, I can't know that I love God, but I can know whether I'm practicing charity to my neighbor. Okay, so, and St. John has something to say about that too, as in the evangelist.
So,
I'm sure St. John of the Cross too. Yes?
So going to the casino is not a right.
I'm sorry?
Going to the casino on Sunday afternoon is not a right. Going to the casino on Sunday afternoon is not a right.
Well, you shouldn't cause other people to work on Sunday unnecessarily. But I won't say that visiting the casino is utterly sinful on a Sunday. But
you can continue to go.
but I would say it'd be better to do it on a Saturday than a Sunday. And again, the Sunday shouldn't just be a day of pure entertainment, but it could be that sports or some recreation where you're getting together is perfectly fine. But you have to again have the what's your focus of why you're doing it. If it's just, well, I have free time, so I'm going to use it and party until I have to get back to work. That's not the correct attitude of Sunday. It'd be more like, I'm worshiping God, I'm keeping the day holy, but I'm also using it to be recreated myself and refocus myself on God. Because you can get worn down by work and dehumanized by it. To the point where, if we think of like Joseph Pieper talking about, he has a book called Leisure. And he talks about people that they're so worn down by work that all they basically do is when they get home, plop down on the sofa, get a beer and watch TV and totally veg. Is that really human activity? Or is it a matter of being able to have the leisure to improve our minds, to build our spirits, to improve our relationships with one another? That's what leisure was really meant for. And that's, I would say, what the Sabbath rest was meant for.
But sister, the world's changed, and sometimes you have to work on a Sunday. So how would you say to I'm a librarian, I have to sometimes work on a Sunday. In some professor, I mean, you have to, what would you say? Do you have any ideas on how to keep that day holy? Or
Okay. Well, I am going to talk about, at the end of this talk, I'm going to look at the distinctions of what's forbidden is unnecessary servile labor. And so, with your question, I will segue into the negatives. Okay, so, it looks like a little detour before we get into the negatives. Okay, so holy days of obligation. Every Sunday is a little Easter. In one sense, that is the core of the liturgical year. But there are also holy days of obligation that mark off special occasions in the life of Mary, Jesus, Mary, and the saints. Okay, so, and if you'll notice, there are 10 of them, not 5. Okay, so here in the United States, since we're in a non-Catholic country, let's admit it, and more we're getting to be in a very, very secularized, as your question reflects. The bishops of the United States have received dispensation to reduce the number of holy days of obligation to 5, or cut them in half, if you would. So I have the ones that are obliged in the United States in yellow, and then the ones that are universally observed, as in other countries observe these. Like if you go to Rome, they're all observed. Okay, any excuse, right? In fact, any obscure excuse to get it out. But so if we start at the top with the Immaculate Conception, this would be December 8th. And she's the patroness of our country, not just of our diocese. So obviously that's one that we would continue to have. Christmas, universally observed, and so easily done. Mary Mother of God is January 1st, or Mary Mother of God, January 1st. Again, pretty universally celebrated. Now, Epiphany, if we were in like Puerto Rico, that is the big holiday. That is a holy day of obligation in Puerto Rico, or in Spain, or wherever, because that's where the gifts are actually given. And in fact, in Puerto Rico, they really don't go back to school or anything until February. So, that because that Christmas vacation is so important. So, the Ascension, which is coming up. Now, I'm kind of sad about that, but about, what was it, 7 years ago? Maybe it was 10 years ago. The Diocese of Wichita, not a problem with shortage of priests, but the other 3 dioceses of Kansas, very short on priests. And so, not to confuse the faithful, we just went to, now it's Ascension Sunday instead of Ascension Thursday. And I'm kind of sad because that was that last break before finals. Darn. Okay. I would really like to see that. You know, we have to, okay, 20 priests have the May. Can't we go back? But that's not the picture for the other dioceses. So, in solidarity with all the dioceses of Kansas, we have gone to that. I think right now there's only 2 dioceses in the United States that still have Ascension Thursday. Oh, there's 3.
They were talking about that the other day on the radio yesterday.
Oh, there are 3.
I think Omaha, and then
Lincoln, yes.
And then I think New York, and there's 2 on the East Coast.
I think Arlington, Virginia, or at least they did. I don't know if they still do. But it's kind of like, okay, Ascension Thursday, very well. Corpus Christi is supposed to be the Thursday after, is it after Pentecost or no? It's the Thursday after Holy Trinity Sunday. So, unfortunately, again, that got moved in the United States to Sundays, and that's pretty universal. That Corpus Christi is celebrated on Sundays. So there's Body and Blood Sunday instead of Corpus Christi, which is the Sunday after Holy Trinity Sunday, which is the Sunday after Pentecost. Oh, by the way, speaking of liturgical matters, Pope Francis has declared the Monday after Pentecost the Feast of Mary, Mother of the Church. So, I want to put that on your calendars. I was very disappointed that the Magnificat did not put that in there. God, come on. Right, so, again, the Assumption, August 15th. St. Joseph, one of the 2 solemnities in Lent. So, March 19th. And the Annunciation should be in there too. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10.
You don't have it.
It's not yet.
I guess something.
Well, now that I think of it, maybe the Annunciation or the Feast of the Incarnation. I thought it was. I'll have to double check on that one. But there are 10, not 11. Okay, and then the Feast of St. Peter and Paul.
June 29th.
Yes, June 29th. That's right. Okay, so those are the universal feast days, and some of these coincide with the Eastern Rite. I believe they would call the Assumption the Dormition, and of course Christmas and Epiphany. Okay, now negative commandments. Here we go. So, missing Mass on Sunday through one's own fault and unnecessary servile labor. So, we'll look at these distinctions here in a minute, but this is what's forbidden by the 3rd commandment. So, missing Mass on Sunday through our own fault. Okay, so if it's laziness or we could have, like a lot of people, their excuse is, oh, well, we were traveling, so we missed Mass. And it's kind of like, well, it could happen. It did happen to me. I had a 24-hour plane flight, but I foresaw it and went to Saturday evening Mass because I knew I would be traveling all day, literally 24 hours, and I would not be able to get Mass on Sunday. That happened one time in my life. Okay, but there's this cool invention called the internet. And you just type, just say, I bet there's even a Mass Times app that you can get on your
Yeah.
phone. And it tells you, just like where are all the Aldis or where are all the Quick Trips, you can type in and find what Mass or what church is closest to you. It's amazing how it works. Okay, so,
I can remember, sister, this will date me. I'm the oldest in the room.
Don't be surprised.
Can I talk for a change? You talked about casinos long enough. I can remember airports, I know in New England, would all have Mass on Saturday. There would be a chapel in the airports
right.
where Catholics could go to Mass. Now, of course, they'd be stormed with pitchforks and
Well, actually, I think St. Louis still does, and Chicago
Do
still
they
does. Yes. They do celebrate Mass so that people can attend in the, now, well, they also have their little prayer corner for the Muslims and such,
well,
yes.
that's what's happened now, the
Yes.
universal.
But you will find that Mass is still celebrated there. Yes, and sometimes the Eucharist is actually reserved, depending on the diocese where the airport is.
Yeah, they all used to have
Yes.
Saturday and Sunday Mass.
Yes, some still do. Okay, so, although I will have to admit I haven't traveled anywhere for a year or two, but my understanding from my
No, that's
sisters who
good.
travel is
Yeah.
it's still available some places. Okay, but missing Mass just because you're traveling, again, there are Catholic churches everywhere. You can even go to Tibet, and there's a Catholic church in Tibet. You go to Stockholm in Sweden, and there will be a storefront Catholic church. My parents attended it when they were there, It's just a matter of finding out, taking the trouble to find out. If you would take the trouble to find out where the nearest gas station is, or the nearest convenience store, then you know that there's something out there for the Catholic Mass too. Now, if it is really true that you can't miss, or you can't get to a Sunday Mass, like let's say you are in missionary territory, or something like that. Actually, this might be some of my distinctions. Hold on, I'm going to check for a moment. Okay, yes, I'm going to talk about it here just in a second. Okay, so missing Mass through our own fault, and then unnecessary servile labor. Please note those two adjectives, and we're going to look at those, okay, to answer your question. So, some distinctions concerning what these two prohibitions mean. Okay, so first, missing Mass through our own fault. Now, one of the excuses for this would be distance. So, for example, a friend of the community was a missionary, Augustinian missionary in Peru. And his parish took up like half of the country. And he was in charge of hundreds of thousands of people spread out over thousands of miles. And some of his parish or mission churches that he would have to go to, he would start out in a Jeep, and then he would take a burro, and then he would go through the forest and go through rope bridges and climb and get to the Mass, or be able to give Mass to those people. But he could only get to them once a month, okay? So now obviously he set up catechists and people that could help him with the parish, and he did reserve the Blessed Sacrament there, but he could not physically get there to provide Mass for them every Sunday. But on the other hand, did he arrange for them to have communion service on Sunday with readings and catechesis on Sunday? Yes. So the people in those villages kept Sunday, they kept Sunday holy, even if they couldn't get the Mass every Sunday. Okay, so that's something to realize. Sometimes distance does prevent you from going to Mass on Sunday. And I can think of, now that this time has passed, but when my great-great-grandparents first came to the United States, they settled up by Beloit, Kansas. And the nearest church to them was a day's journey. So they would have had to travel, all Saturday to get to Mass, stay there, and then travel all the way back on Monday to get back to their farm. Okay, so now they did do that periodically, but they did not do that every Sunday because it was prohibitive to run a farm. Okay, now, however, I had that crucifix that they brought from Germany that they had on in their front room, right? And they had a missal, and they prayed the prayers of the missal. So even though they couldn't get to Mass on Sunday, they prayed the prayers of the Mass every Sunday. They kept it holy even though they couldn't get there, okay? So when we say distance prevents us from getting to Sunday Mass, that could be possible, but that doesn't mean that our obligation to keep the day holy isn't still there. It's just we might have to do it by a rosary or reading the prayers of the Mass and maybe watching TV, and watching a televised Mass in our own time. But that would be something we might have to do. Okay, now if we are taking care of infants or the infirm, that might be another time where even if we would want to go to Mass, we can't because we are the primary caregiver of somebody. And we had a sister, we as a community decided that we would not put her in a nursing home. We were going to take care of her. And she needed 24-hour care, and that meant that one of the sisters would stay and miss Mass with the community to be with her, and then she'd go to a later Mass. It would be possible I had a community that took care of it, and I could go to a later Mass. But it could be that you have somebody who's the primary caregiver and can't leave the side of this person who's sick or the infants that need to be taken care of. Okay, so that would be a serious reason. But then again, to the best of our ability to keep the day holy through prayer of some sort. And yes, go ahead.
Some nations preach, like you said, can't get it, or so have Mass on Thursday or Wednesday. And
right, so that would be the case, is if somebody was in such a remote area, it would be when the priest could get there, you should be there for the Mass, right, exactly. Even if it wasn't a Sunday, correct. Okay, although usually what the priest would do is he would stay there for a week so that the parish would have Sunday Mass, and then he would take care of the baptisms and the weddings and everything, and then come back later. So that would be some things. Okay, now illness. Obviously, if you are ill, especially if it's the flu or something, stay home, please. Don't share it with everybody else. But that would be ideal. If you are so ill yourself that you can't make it, then obviously God understands and you're okay. And you might even be so sick you can't pray, and that's okay too. And God understands. And sometimes our prayer is just offering up our suffering. So if you're very ill, then don't worry about everything. Okay, now let's look at the question of unnecessary servile labor. So let's look first at necessary work and then voluntary labor. Okay, so there are certain tasks that have to be done. Doesn't matter what day of the week. You have to eat, yes. Children have to be taken care of. We would not want doctors or firemen to take the day off on Sunday, yes. So when it's necessary servile labor, obviously somebody who is being employed and it's necessary, then obviously they should get a just wage for working on a Sunday. It's what they have to do. Okay, so we would say if it's, say, a restaurant, you might say that a restaurant might open a little bit later on the Sunday, but are they breaking the Sabbath if they provide food for people? I don't think so. Would babysitters or child care providers be able to work on the Sunday? Say that might be something that has to happen because children need to be taken care of, especially very young children, right? Also think of things like Vulcan Chemicals south of Wichita, right? They have a steam pump that runs 24/7, to separate salt into chlorine and sodium. If that pump is not watched, what would be dangerous to the entire community would be the possible accidental release of chlorine gas and killing people. Okay, we want somebody working at Vulcan on Sunday. Okay, so you understand what I'm saying here is if it's necessary, and one could expand it to say, let's say that you have somebody who's so poor that they have to work on Sunday, then that would be something that would not break the Sabbath, but that person would still want to somehow keep the Sabbath through when they are off to be able to pray. And I believe it is state law that employers must give sufficient time off for you to be able to worship on Sunday or Saturday. That is what at least used to be the law. Okay, you're saying not anymore?
I don't know about that. Is Newman open? Is the library open on Sunday? Yeah.
But do they have a chance to go to mass, or is it?
I think working for the city, they think it's your obligation to do it on another time, on your own. They're not going to give you, the time off to go to church, no matter what denomination.
Really? Okay, that's a change in the law from what it used to be.
I don't think that.
Okay.
This gave you an opportunity.
No, but still, this is part-time. We have an obligation. I go to mass in the morning earlier than I will go because I think what they do is the hours are restricted. On Sunday, they're only open half the time they are normal.
Right, with that idea.
So that idea, if you want to go to church, you can. But going back, sister, and this is really serious, I would have added another codicil to what you had before. I think weather would play a certain, I think you have an obligation to keep yourself as well as other people. If you guys are going to have a tornado or hail here in Kansas, I don't think you should be going to mass.
I will agree with you.
I mean,
Yes.
truly.
I'm sorry, it was just an oversight. But yes, I can remember, it was a long time ago that we had this much snow in Kansas, but I believe it was 1975, we had 18 inches of partly cloudy. And my dad tried to plow us out, and we all got in the car for Sunday, and we got the car about 100 feet away from our house, and it was stuck. And so we all went back to the house. But we tried to get there on Sunday, but it was not possible. And I don't think we sinned in not going to mass that day. Right. If it's physically impossible, is what it's talking about.
But I
Whether it's distance
I
or
rationalize, oh God, I'm going to slip, it's rainy, it's icy, maybe I'll slip and then I'll break a leg, or maybe I'll drive the car into something. So you have to be careful on what your actual motive is.
Yes.
And sometimes I'll push it, and I'll go to mass on Monday, and God will understand. So that's.
Well, I could see somebody who's very elderly and frail who's like,
yourself.
could slip on the ice and break their leg and die, it's possible. That obviously would be a serious consideration.
Searching for an excuse.
Aren't you glad he's not your parish priest?
But after the big tornadoes, a lot of our churches in Oklahoma, the last several years, what they do now is they have that tick, what is it called on the bottom of your television station?
Yeah.
Where the churches, the priest will tell their people exactly.
To stay home?
Yeah. So that way the ones who, especially the older ones who feel the obligation to fulfill the obligation, it's better for them, they feel, for the priest to tell them, stay home and take care of yourself.
Why don't you move to Oklahoma? That seems to be. That's the
Okay.
solution.
All right, I have 5 minutes left, so I better move on to the. But, okay, so necessary work would be, it has to be done, and if you're employed, then it would only be right that you get paid for that. Okay, so necessary work does not break the Sabbath or the Sunday. Now, the other thing is voluntary labor. So servile means you're getting paid for it, as opposed to volunteer, which means that you're willingly doing it. Okay, so For one person, let's say that somebody's profession is to be a gardener. For them to work on Sunday might be breaking the Sabbath because they're gardening on a Sunday and getting paid for it when they don't really need to. Conversely, however, let's say that that is your outlet. You're a teller in a bank, and Sunday is the only day you can garden, and it's a great relief to you, and you're working maybe harder than the gardener is the rest of the week, but you're doing it because it's recreation. Then obviously you aren't breaking the Sabbath. Am I making some sense here? Or what you'll find is, like, say, a construction worker or a contractor who it might be that his job is to build houses, but on Sunday he goes and does a St. Francis build, or he donates his labor. In other words, he's got this expertise in a facility, and he goes to donate his labor to something. Would he be breaking the Sabbath? The answer would be no. He's doing a work of mercy at that point. Okay, so the rule of thumb is, am I doing it for profit? And do I have to do it? Okay, so those would be, if you would, that's the distinction I would make here. Okay, so it's that understanding then of, is it necessary? And am I being paid for it? Then that's okay. Is it unnecessary and I'm being paid for it? Then I'm breaking the Sabbath. Okay. Am I making some sense here, I hope? Okay, so now we come to that other aspect of, what if I do go to the casino on Sunday? It's how I recreate. But is it necessary to do that? Then I'd say that I'm going to leave it to your conscience. I'm teaching general principles, not black and white. If you go to the casino on Sunday, you are sinning. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. Okay, what I am saying is, if I am by my activity making somebody else work unnecessarily on Sunday, I'm breaking the Sabbath. Okay, I'm breaking the Sabbath. Okay. Now it could be, it happens. I have been shopping at Dillon's on a Sunday. It's true. Now, did I sin? No, it's my superior said, we are all out of eggs, we have nothing for breakfast, go run and get some eggs after Mass. Yes, sister. And I do, so we can eat. Okay, that was necessary, I had to do it. Okay? You understand what I'm saying? But if I'm shopping at the mall on Sunday afternoon just for recreation, and I don't really need to do that, what am I doing is I'm voting with my dollars to support businesses keeping open on Sunday. And if you think of, are there businesses out there that close on Sunday or are doing just fine? Think of Hobby Lobby, Chick-fil-A, here I am, ads. But neither of them are Catholic, but are they using that business principle of, we don't really need the business, and it's more important that our employees be able to observe this third commandment than to get the money. In other words, the profit is better, again, sharing the profit with our employees is, we could do Catholic social doctrine all over the place, but the idea of a business is obviously for our profit, yes, but also for the common good. And not just the common good of our employees, but the common good of the society that we live in. Okay, so we have to balance that, and to remember that we are voting with our dollars if we are indulging, or how do you say, patronizing a business that's open on Sunday when it doesn't need to be. Okay, we're helping to set up that social sin, if you would. Okay.
Sister,
Yes.
how about the time of going on vacation during Holy Week and not going to church on Holy Thursday and Holy Friday and things like that?
Well,
Central America, something that's come on. Nobody, you can't get a hotel room anywhere.
that's sad.
It is.
But I will say that Holy Thursday and Good Friday, though, are not holy days. Holy Thursday and Good Friday are not days of obligation. But it would be very Saturday.
The institution of the Eucharist?
No, it's not a holy day of obligation.
No.
And neither is Ash Wednesday, although a lot of people think so. But to miss their Sunday, Easter obligation, that would be seriously, yes, that would be sad. And that's one of the reasons why we don't have spring break, or at least at Cape and Carroll, they don't have spring break during Holy Week, precisely because they don't want the kids to go skiing and miss their whole Easter obligation.
See, so when I was little, the whole week for the business in my area were closed. And there was only classical music the whole week. No news, no.
No news even.
No, classical music.
LSU next in New Orleans, they get you off on Mardi Gras, and they get you off on Ash Wednesday because everybody's too drunk.
Giving over their hand. Okay, well, I am supposed to end at 2, is that correct? Okay, so I want to be good. Although I would be happy to entertain questions, but I think